الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر.
Hi and welcome to Worlds Apart, a program that is dedicated to speaking the truth in love. I'm your host, Rommel Gassain, and today we have with us Ian Powell, who will be discussing with us ideologies that are truly worlds apart. First of all, welcome to the show, Ian.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
It's wonderful to be able to have you come here and share some of your insights with us. Now, what we normally do is on the very first episode, we like to learn a little bit about our guest speaker, about their life and their ministry. Can you please tell us a little bit about your upbringing and why it is that you became a Christian?
Well, I grew up in Sydney, Australia, and I had a terrific childhood. Parents who loved me, lots of good friends, near enough to the beach to be able to get down there. I mean, I just look back and think I had one of the happiest childhoods. I got nothing to complain about, nothing to go and see a counsellor about. It was a good time, and enjoyed school and enjoyed sport, and life was good. And so I've got no complaints. In fact, just really thankful for that childhood.
Oh, fantastic. And so as you grew up, did you ever have any questions about your eternity, questions about God? Were your parents Christian?
I suppose as a younger kid, I had thoughts here and there about God and prayed, I guess, like everyone does when they get in trouble. And my mother was pretty clearly a Christian. My father was a good man, but didn't really become a Christian until after I did. Okay. But I didn't help him become a Christian, I don't think. But I think that's probably the case. Now, by the time I was in senior high school, 16, 17, 18, I was an atheist. I didn't believe there was a God. I didn't need God. I didn't want God because I just thought God was like a combination of a policeman, a teacher and a parent, but who you could never escape from. I didn't need someone like that in my life.
Yes. And so were you the type of person that would often argue with people who believed in God? Were you a staunch atheist?
I did enjoy, I've always enjoyed a good argument.
Yes.
A good discussion. But I would argue with Christians, but I would more send them up. Ask them questions and not wait for answers. Mock them for being psychological weaklings who needed an invisible imaginary friend, which I didn't need. I also thought that you couldn't be a modern, intelligent, educated, scientific person and believe all this mumbo jumbo. So yes. I'd have arguments, but looking back, at least until after I left school, I never listened to the answers, I don't think.
And so where was the turning point? What was it that led you up to challenge your thoughts or your beliefs?
It probably all goes back to the very last day of school, which was muck-up day, and we were preparing for that. And the guy who was planning muck-up day, who was in charge of the organisation, a guy called Jack Manchester, he drowned on the night before muck-up day, came home from school, jumped into the little pool in the backyard. We don't know what happened, but his brother found him at the bottom of the pool. And I think what that did for me was, it didn't make me believe in God, but when I went to his funeral, and Jack had become a Christian about 3 months before he died, so the minister could be blunter about issues of God, life, death, heaven, hell. Now, I wasn't at all convinced that there was a heaven and a hell. In fact, at that stage, I believed that when you were dead, that was it. Which is a very nice belief, really. You can escape any sense of being answerable for anything.
That's true, yes.
I think it's a very comforting belief, rather than heaven and hell, or something like that. So, but what struck me was that when Jack died, was that if Jack could drown, and he was a very good swimmer, if Jack could drown and suddenly be in whatever was on the other side of death, it just struck me I could be there just as quickly. I was riding a motorbike, which, temporary Australian club, and so it just made me think, I really need to check this out. I kind of felt I owed it to myself. So I spent maybe 4 or 5 months arguing with Christians, but actually for the first time listening. I did a bit of reading in Buddhism, particularly Tibetan Buddhism, and I bought a Bible. I was working in a pub in Sydney, and I thought I need a book to read. I was getting bored on the bus. I wasn't a great reader, and I'd never bought a book before and didn't know how much they cost. And the only book I could afford in the bookshop was a Bible. So I thought, okay, well, I'll buy the New Testament and I'll read it, because I was trying to think through the God questions. And I used to hide it under my bed because I didn't want my older brother to see me reading it. So I began to read the Gospels, the stories of Jesus, and I was having all these arguments about, is it true? Questions of history. Because I believed, as I think most Australians do, you just kind of know that the Bible isn't good history, and it's a story that's been retold so many times, it's been lost, and Jesus couldn't have risen from the dead because no one rises from the dead. You don't think it through, you don't know anything about the documents really, but everyone believes it.
Yes, that's right.
So I began to argue that out with guys at church. I'd turn up at church. I often wouldn't be there for the church service because I knew that was boring, because everyone knew church was boring, even though I'd hardly been as a young adult. But I'd hang around after church to argue with people some of the questions of history. And slowly and very reluctantly I was getting persuaded that the fact of the matter was, as a friend of mine says, there aren't myths in the Bible, there are myths about the Bible. And I think that's true. This guy's an ancient historian and he knows his stuff. And I think that I believed all sorts of myths. And so slowly they were getting wound back. And I wasn't happy, Rommel. I didn't want to become a Christian. I didn't like where this line of logic seemed to be going. But I just knew in the end the lesson I'd learned at Jack's funeral, which is this is too big to avoid, too risky, really, to get wrong. And then I was reading the New Testament. I was really surprised what Jesus was really like. I thought I would know what Jesus was like. I'd been dragged to Sunday school, and I hated it, but I'd been there. So I assumed that I'd know, but he was nothing like what I thought he was. And I got to a point one night where it said, you're either a child of God or a child of the devil, which shocked me, 1 John chapter 3. And I knew enough then to know that I wasn't a follower of Jesus, but I thought I was kind of like neutral, like Switzerland in the Second World War, leaning to the side of the good. Because I remember one time, or a couple of times, being at parties and being really quite drunk, but arguing for Christianity, which is kind of ridiculous, really. But that's what I was doing. And then that night I decided I had to change, that it said Jesus appeared to destroy the works of the devil. And I thought, well, that probably includes me. So very reluctantly, in fact, I was quite angry about having to become a Christian. I said, okay, I've just got to do this. It's too serious. And so that was sort of when I became a Christian. So I was about 19. But then the first few months of being Christian were not much fun. My older brother, who was kind of my hero, and I was frightened what would happen when he discovered I was Christian, because he was cleverer than I was, better read than I was. And he said to me when he discovered, you only became a Christian because you're at a confusing time of life and da-da-da-da.
It's just the phase you're going through. Yeah,
and I'd gone to uni for a week, then left because I decided I didn't like the course I was doing.
Yes.
He said, it's just to help you cope. I said, oh no, Ross, this is the worst thing I've ever done in my life. This is miserable. I'm only doing this because it's true. And that was true. I hadn't got at all how wonderful God was. And when I met Christians who talked about loving God, I really thought in my own heart they were probably lying.
It's just a psychological state or something that they're putting on.
Yeah, well, I just thought you can respect God, you can fear God, as the Bible speaks, as the beginning of wisdom. You could fear God, you can respect God, you can be thankful to God for the good things in the world. But there was nothing, I'd never discovered anything lovable about God.
Not yet.
No.
And I think that's an amazing thing, because often enough we hear about people who, I've had people say to me, the reason why you're a Christian is because your parents were Christian and your grandparents were a Christian. And it's an amazing thing, because your parents really weren't practicing Christians. Perhaps they were Christian by name, but you very much regarded yourself to be an atheist.
Yeah.
But you were challenged not by other Christians, but you were challenged by eternity. One of your friends had passed away, and it reminds me of the scripture in the verse in the Bible which says that it's appointed for men to die, and then comes the judgment. And so that dawned on you, and then you went out and you started to search and seek, well, who is the real God?
Yeah.
Yes.
And I was open to anything. I was quite happy if there was no God. That was the best option. And it could have been any religion. Now, there's a zillion religions in the world. You can't look at all of them. But it's a bit like once you discover that 2 + 2 is actually equal to 4, you can you've got to be open to the fact you might have been wrong. And you need to be open to look at it again. But I got convinced that it was this Jesus thing. And then over time, I began to discover, firstly, that I was forgiven. Because I think those first few months I was living knew there was a judgment to come.
Yes.
Didn't know when I was going to arrive there. Either
Yes.
Jesus could come back or I could die, motorbikes, swimming, etc.
But it wasn't a relationship yet.
No, I just had to try and do the stuff that I had to do and stop doing the stuff that I wanted to do that I shouldn't do. Go to boring church, read the boring Bible, But it was, I think one of the verses that had stuck in my mind was where Jesus says, what does it profit a man if he gains the whole world but loses his soul?
Yes.
And I just thought, 70 years of fun, eternity of hell, that was a bad deal, as against 70 years of boredom, which I thought it was going to be being a Christian, for an eternity of heaven. I could see that was a good deal. So it was to my surprise when, over a period of months, it dawned on me that God had forgiven me. And it was in fact, I remember the moment and where I was sitting on a bus when it suddenly dawned on me, I am forgiven. God has forgiven.
Wow,
That's
yes.
a promise, a massive sense of relief. If you told me that a year ago, I wouldn't have cared because I wasn't aware of the seriousness of God. But having got some sense of God is not to be played with, and to realise that I didn't have to hope I might be forgiven, but I had a promise from God that if I placed my faith in Jesus Christ, He had forgiven me.
Yes.
And then over time, I got more and more excited about the grace of God, and really getting a sense of how much He loved me, as shown only and really clearly in the death of what He paid,
Yes.
so that I could be forgiven. And so anyone can be forgiven, from nice guys to rats. I was a bit of a rat, but all of us. It was just. Then I was really excited about being Christian, and enjoyed it.
That's right.
Yeah.
And it's a wonderful thing, isn't it, that when you discover that, God is not out to get you. He's not out to squash you.
Yeah, yeah.
He's not out to vindicate or to, take revenge upon His righteousness. But really, what He wants is He wants you to enter into this wonderful relationship. And He says, yes, look, you're a sinner. You need to be forgiven. And so what I'm interested to find out is that when was it that you discovered that He is a loving Saviour? I mean, you've been a Christian for many years, and I'm sure that you've, continued on because of His grace, but every time you look at Him, every time you learn about Him, He's just all the more lovely. So when was it that you first discovered that He's a loving Saviour?
I think I got, it was probably 1976, I think. I'd been a Christian for a while, so I'd gone from just, He's too big to fight with, and it's true, rats. He really had risen from the dead, which is the great proof Jesus offers that what He's saying is true. He had forgiven me, which was good. But I would go to prayer meetings and people would talk about loving Jesus, and I used to think, you don't love Jesus, and I was being very judgmental looking back on it. I went to work with a minister part-time down in Wollongong, a guy called Reg Hanlon, and Reg was obsessed in a good way with the death of Jesus for us. And I prayed for a year, a prayer I'd first heard in a musical, Godspell, which I thought they'd made up, but I discovered it's an ancient Christian prayer where it says, 3 things I pray: to see You more clearly, love You more dearly, follow You more nearly. So I prayed that prayer: God, help me to see You clearly, more clearly, then I will love You, and then I'll follow You more nearly. So, and I think working with Reg and listening to him again and again take us back to the death of Jesus as the great and final proof of how much God loved us, how much He was willing to sacrifice in order that we could have a just and perfect forgiveness. And then I was actually praying one time. I was a bit sick, and I was praying, and I found myself, I said to God, "And I love you." And I remember thinking, whoa,
Where'd
what's
that come
going on
from?
here?
Yes.
You know, and I thought, no, that's the only word to express what was welling up in my heart. But I'd been a Christian then for probably 2 or 3 years before the penny dropped. So God was very patient with me. I was a slow learner, but it was worth learning, and that really makes all the difference.
Yes.
A friend of mine recently was talking to a Pakistani Muslim guy who, Al was trying to explain to him about the gospel, about how we get forgiven because of what Jesus does, not because we kind of earn it. And the guy said to him, "Well, why would you obey God then? You know, if you know you're forgiven."
That's right.
Because he said the reason,
Yes.
you know, as a Muslim, he said the reason he obeyed God was hoping to get more righteousness and, as it were, points to make it more likely that he'd be okay on the day.
So what he meant by that is, if you're forgiven, then it's almost like a license to sin. You can do whatever you want to.
Because
yes.
and Al said, well, no, you obey God. It's your way of saying thanks. I mean, what else can you, when you realise how much He loves you? And it was lovely because Al said the guy's eyes, he said his eyes, he nearly wept. His eyes moistened up. And the guy said, of course that's why you should obey God. Of course you shouldn't obey God trying to score points with God. And I think you can only do that when you get this, how much He loves and how perfectly He forgives. So then my Christian life was fun. Now, in a sense, if God said, okay, I've abolished heaven and hell, just one life, die, food for worms, which He could justly do if He wanted to, I'd still say to people, you want to get to know Jesus, because there is nothing as beautiful, nothing as satisfying to the mind, to the heart, and nothing that transforms the way we treat people.
That's right, yeah. I mean, God created us and made us, and He has given us the capacity and the largeness of our heart, and He's the only one that can really fill it. You know, and it's an amazing thing. It's almost like when an architect designs something, he knows what it's been built for. And in one sense, that's true when it comes to God. Now, I'd like to move a little bit now to your ministry, the ministry that you've been involved in for a number of years. I mean, it's a wonderful thing to be able to see that you became a Christian, you're following Jesus, and you're continuing on. And not only that, but even to the point now where you're sharing and you're telling other people about how wonderful and great He is. So please tell me a little bit about the ministry that you're involved in. I think it's called, is it the City Bible Forum? Yeah,
City Bible Forum, or CBF sometimes. Yes, you're right. It's a terrific privilege that because of the money that other people give, after tax money, that enables me to spend my time in the city talking to men and women about Jesus. So City Bible Forum was started probably about 20 years ago. Craig Josling and a few other Christian guys realised that they had more friends at work often than in their neighbourhood, because they worked long hours. And so they were having more conversations about Jesus at work than at church, or than in their neighbourhood. So they thought, we need to have some stuff we can invite friends to at work. So they began to, so Craig got this, it was called Ecom then, and Ecom used to run the City Bible Forum, and now we've changed our name to CBF. And it was, we run things at breakfast, like tomorrow I'm at a breakfast for lawyers, after work and at lunchtime. I was speaking at lunchtime, and we run things at, around workplaces where people can come who aren't Christians and hear the message of Jesus about the is it true question and the what difference does it make question, explained in a way that's relevant for businessmen and women. And there's always time for questions. So we always make sure there's time for people to be able to interact and ask, questions, clarifying questions or disagreement questions.
Which is very important. You know, I mean, you can talk, but it's so important to be able to listen and see what people's concerns are. As you've been doing this, I mean, you've been doing this for quite a while. Do you find that many of the questions are the same, similar?
Yes, pretty much. One of the things that we do is we run little courses to help Christian people be more helpful to their friends. The Bible says to be ready to give an answer to people who want to know about the hope that you have. And the only way to get ready is to get ready, to prepare. And so we run courses like that. And I often want to be encouraging people so that there aren't 1,000 questions. There's really 5 or 6 or 7 questions that keep coming up in different shapes and sizes. And you can learn fairly straightforwardly how to approach some of the great central questions that come up. So it's very rare that I get asked a question that I think, gee, that's new. In fact, I like it when I get asked a question that I haven't heard. I mean, every question's interesting.
That's right.
Because it's a real question from the person. But yeah, there's just a few basic issues that keep coming up.
That's right. And it's an amazing thing because you can see that the hearts of men are fashioned alike. You know, we often do hear this, is that we have the same needs, we have the same desires, and often people do ask very similar questions, and that's not a wrong thing.
No.
Now, quite recently, you've been involved in something that's quite new and quite unique, this new Billboard campaign. And it's specifically targeted to Muslims. And I think this is a wonderful thing. And I'm hoping that you can share a little bit about that to us, to our viewers. What is that about? Is it simply a reaction to a billboard that was put up by Muslims? Or is this just something that is new, it's a new concept? Please explain.
Yeah, yes. A couple of, maybe 3 weeks ago, an organisation started to put up 3 billboards around various parts of Sydney, of which the first one, and it was run on the Herald, claimed that Jesus was a prophet of Islam. And I guess over the last 5-10 years, I've been spending more time with our Islamic neighbours and trying to learn and try to understand what the Quran says. And I mean, I didn't even know there were such things as the hadiths and things like this. Trying to understand it so I can love more helpfully my Islamic neighbours. And so this came up, and a few of us just passed a few emails around saying we should say something. They've said something about Jesus. Now, I have little doubt that the people who put it up understand how grievous that would be for Christians to have Jesus just described as a prophet. I meet lots of Muslims in all sorts of places around Sydney who tell me when they discover I'm a Christian, we believe in Jesus, we believe he's a prophet, and I don't have any doubt they expect me to be pleased with that. But I have no doubt the guys who put those billboards up know. I mean, they know what's going on.
That's right,
They know Christians will be aggrieved by that. But aggrieved not in a way that's ever going to make us violent. That's not our thing. But so we just thought something should be done. Some response should be made. They've made a statement about our Jesus. So we thought we should have some sort of dialogue. So we just were talking on the email and on the phone, and we got a few people in who were had some deeper knowledge of Islam, people who'd grown up in the Middle East, people who'd, and we just began to talk, and we thought in the end we decided the polite thing to do is to answer in kind. They've written on a billboard, so let's get a billboard. And we discovered just how expensive billboards are. But we just thought we just got to do this. So we just collected, a few of us threw in some money, and just little bit by little bit, we sort of got up to the money, and we had to work out what to say. So it is a response. If our Islamic neighbours hadn't put it up, we wouldn't probably be doing this.
Mm-hmm.
Although some of the guys had a dream for years of using billboards to effect for Jesus. Yes. And because the Muslims started the topic on Jesus, now they're going to move the discussion from that. But that was their opening sort of statement. We thought, right, you want to talk about Jesus? Let's talk. So we put up the sign, Dear Aussie Muslims, glad you want to talk about Jesus, love to chat more. Signed AussieChristians.com.au.
Which is a wonderful thing, isn't it? Because it's an inviting billboard. And I mean, the website that you mentioned there is a real great resource for Muslims, Aussie Muslims specifically, who want to learn a little bit more about Jesus. And so you're quite adamant that Jesus is more than a prophet.
Oh, yeah. And I don't really know how anyone can have ever looked at the history around the life of Jesus and think that him being a prophet is an adequate answer. I mean, just on two fronts, if I can.
Yes.
One is that Jesus, to my knowledge, and I've been reading the Gospels for some time, and I've asked a few Muslim friends to correct me, he never describes himself as a prophet. So when some of my Muslim friends say, if you can find somewhere where Jesus says, I'm God, we might believe it. I said, well, first, if that's the line of logic, you must never call him a prophet, because he never says he's a prophet. He uses lots of names for himself, all of them much more majestic than a prophet.
Yes.
And actually, when Jesus turns to his friends and says, "Who do people say that I am?" the category of prophet is the wrong answer.
Yes.
In the end, Peter finally, Jesus says, "Well, who do you say I am?" Because they've given what others are saying, prophet, maybe Jeremiah, one of these guys. Who do you say that I am? Peter says, "You're the Christ, the Son of the living God." And Jesus says to him, flesh and blood hasn't revealed this to you. My Father in heaven has revealed it to you.
That's right.
So it's the wrong category. And also, we know from the Jewish writings, from the time in the Talmud, that they understood Jesus to be a blasphemer, that he made claims about himself and his specific relationship with God that were far more than a prophet would.
That's right, exactly.
And if Jesus was a prophet, the early Christians would have called him a prophet. The Jews didn't feel any need to make more of Moses than that he was a great prophet. Muslims don't feel any need to make any more of Muhammad than the claim that he's a prophet. If Jesus was a prophet, Christians would have been happy to say, "Hey, he's a prophet." But that's not. He didn't leave that option open.
That's right.
So to say he's a prophet has to, in the end, assume that Jesus is a bit of a dummy because he doesn't say it. All the guys who knew him, his friends, were wrong. And his enemies were wrong. Everybody knew he wasn't leaving that open. So no, I don't think it's an adequate. That's why I say to people, read the at least one gospel,
Yep.
and have a look and for yourself and yeah.
I mean, we have millions of Muslims who watch this show.
Right.
Millions. What would your challenge be to them? I mean, they're watching this and they're listening to you and they're saying, no, he's wrong. He really doesn't know. He really doesn't understand. Well, how can they know? How can they learn? What would you direct them to?
Well, firstly, if I can, I've been doing a bit of reading on this, and one of the things that Muslim people often say, my friends say to me is, you can't take the New Testament seriously. It's been hopelessly changed. Now that, as I understand it, is a non-Quranic argument. The Quran, to my knowledge, and there's a scholar, an Islamic scholar from Melbourne, who's quite clear on this, that it's not a Quranic argument. The Quran itself accuses Christians and Jews, probably rightly, of twisting the scriptures, as Muslims will say that their own people, you've got a sacred text, people will at times get it wrong.
Yes.
But the Quran doesn't do what some of my Muslim friends do, is they just they mock the New Testament. That's just done, they've only learnt to do that from their teachers. I think people like Mr. Deedat and that model that sort of behaviour. But ancient historians don't do that.
That's
secular ancient historians do not, people who've read it and study it don't. So I'd say to my Muslim friends, rather than just accept what you've been taught by people who've just been taught by others who've been taught by others, read it yourself.
Yes.
And there's a coherence to the story. There's a naturalness to the way that the Gospels are told. It's a gripping story anyhow. And so when some of my friends say Jesus never died, Surah 4 talks about Christ didn't die. Well, the trouble with that is it's not as if that's just one detail. It's the death of Jesus is the assumption and presupposition of the Old Testament. It's in the parables. It's in the only regular thing Christians do with the bread and the wine that Jesus sets up is about the death. It just makes mincemeat of history to pretend that Jesus didn't die. So I
That's
say,
right.
do yourself a favour and read the Injil. I mean, I think Muslims ought to read it. I would have thought that's what a good Muslim will do, actually read the Gospel.
Ian, thank you once again for being able to give us this talk. And I think that's such an important thing. I mean, for our viewers, you really need to be able to go back to the Gospels. Read them. There's so many people that have already made a judgment about the Bible that it's like the old phrase or the old saying that you can't judge a book by its cover. Well, have you done that? You need to really ask yourself that question. If you have, please go back to the Bible and read it. Become acquainted with Jesus and who Jesus declares himself to be. Until then, please stay in tune for the very next episode of Worlds Apart. May God bless you.